In for Saltmarsh, I wouldn't wager. I am the most typical of salty, crusty sailor types that you've ever met. Sorry, guys. The voice, it can't handle it, actually. Just give me a second here. Yeah. All right. So you come across this old sailor. Yeah. No, just roll something. Just roll something. Hello and welcome to today's episode of planning for the Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign that I am running on twitch.tv/DND at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. GMT on Saturday, starting on the 25th of May. Now, this contains spoilers, so if you're going to be watching that show and you don't want to know what's coming up, stop watching this video now. Stop watching the video now. If, however, you want to see what goes into planning, at least from my perspective, in terms of running a campaign like this, well then sit back and relax, because that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in today's show. We're going to look at the bigger plan. We've already done that to a degree. We're going to go back to that today just to refine it a little bit. We're going to look at the principal desires, and then we're going to take it a step further. Now, I have been working feverishly to make this thing happen, so yes, there is sometimes quite a lot of effort that goes into producing a game, as you should know, as a game master. These things, however, are going to last for a long time and are going to be usable again and again and again in future campaigns. So I don't mind putting in the effort now. So let's just remind ourselves of where we were and what we were doing. This is the template that we put together. Let me move over a little bit. So this is the template that we put together of our story. I'm going to move this slightly over this way so you can see a little bit more of what's going on. Now, there was a suggestion from one of you guys watching that we change the title of our protagonist, our central evil character, our antagonist, I should say, from Admiral to Commodore. Now, Admiral, the reasoning behind this, by the way, is that Admiral is so overused. There's always an evil Admiral somewhere around, but Commodore is not too common, and there's a reason for it. The Commodore is a very strange nautical space, from what I understand. The Commodore is in charge of the ship that the Admiral is on, and is part of the big fleet and has higher ranking than a captain, but isn't just a captain. Anyway, that's my understanding of it. And I think different navies have different requirements as well. So we've changed him to Commodore Havast Gankari, who wants to destroy Saltmarsh. There's the Black Tide, which has resurrected him because he died 100 years ago. And we've got the Allied races. Now, the Allied races caused me some grief, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show. I've also updated the name of the Baron. The Baron was originally called something else. I've now used the name that was and has been provided in the actual Ghosts of Saltmarsh book, which is Baron Kepmak. Anyway, you'll see why I'm doing that in a little bit as well. So we've got that. If we look at our principal plan, our primary plot, we've got our sea battle, we've got the aquatic races, the Sahaugen, or as certain GMs pronounce it, the Sahugen. We've got the Sahugen, and they're about running around, the Sahugen. Rumours of the Lich, Saltmarsh, all of that kind of stuff is set up for Adventure 1, the very first adventure, which I believe will play out on Saturday after this episode. So that's going to be our very first adventure. So we've got a lot to get through in today's episode if we're going to try and get to where I would like us to be. So we've got that situation. We then are going into the Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh. That's the actual written adventure within the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book. That's the first one that we encounter. And then we start to question it until eventually we get to our climatic battle, which is the defeat of now Commodore Havast Gankari and his evil Black Tide. So that's going to run, all the way down until the adventure is over in 12 long episodes. Well, 12 episodes of 2 hours each. I don't know if that's very long. For role-playing, it certainly isn't. So we've got the basic plan, but now what? Now what do we actually do? Well, now we're going to have to start breaking it down into what do we need. Now, if you've been watching my campaign creator series, I've gone a lot slower in terms of each week looking at a different aspect, bringing in little bits and pieces as we go. What do we need for our next step in terms of the campaign? Well, as far as I'm concerned, our next step is, and if you've been watching this channel for a while now, you will recognize this map, but what we need is we need a map. Now, the book provides us with a map, not this one. This one was custom made for us with Project Deos. If you don't know Project Deos, go and have a look for it. You will find cryptic links to it on all various social platforms, etc., etc. Project Deos was responsible for the map. Principally an artist by the name of Keora designed this map. Well, I designed the shape of the map, and that is particularly what I want to talk about. I'm going to show you a difference. I'm going to show you a difference very quickly, and I think I'm going to take time with this because I feel that it's important. It is important for you to understand and unpack the process, which is what this whole video is about. Here is the original map. This is what I drew originally in Photoshop. Pen tool, there we go. So this is the kind of shape that I wanted to go for, and I wanted to have certain geographic features. Why? I'm going to move away from this map because this map is hideous. It doesn't really show us very much. It shows us enough detail that it could be usable, but it ain't pretty. This is the map that I hand drew with a mouse, admittedly. It's not the map that I'm going to be using. So the map that I'm going to be using, like I said, was generated in Project Deos. A little bit different, a little bit nicer. And it's being housed in World Anvil. World Anvil, of course, is our aggregator, world aggregator of choice. I've done a few things already, and I'm just going to hide them now so they don't get in our way. So this is the map as translated into visually stunning space and incredibly high detail. The little temples of Dras Win, for example, Ansir, Koval. The detailing is absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Why this shape? So the map that is supplied in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh adventure book is a perfectly functional map. There is nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I looked at that map, and what it did not do for me personally as a storyteller is it didn't give me the control that I like to have with my players. Now, I know that this sounds a little bit evil, and perhaps it is. But as you know, I am first and foremost a storyteller. I'm a narrative GM. That is my principal goal. If I can use everything at my disposal to help tell that story, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And the map of Saltmarsh that's provided in the book didn't do that for me. I wanted more control over my player characters. The reason being is that I know that my characters, the moment they get given a ship or they get given the option, they're going to disappear off of the map and go in whatever direction they want. Also, I'm not just planning on running 12 episodes of Ghosts of Saltmarsh and being done. The entire adventure book is designed, and it says it right up front, to fit into existing campaigns or to be part of a campaign or to be used as and when needed in a campaign. That means I'm going to save it. I can't use all of the adventures that were written inside the book in my 12 episodes that I'm doing for Dungeons and Dragons. There's so much stuff to unpack there. It could literally be an entire campaign. So I decided to create a world space that would be usable from a narrative perspective. The Azure Sea is an interesting location to begin with, and I think, aside from Saltmarsh, it's the only name that I decided to keep as the same for a few reasons. One, my players will have read the adventure book, The Ghosts of Saltmarsh, but two, I also wanted to break them away from the mentality that the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book brings with it in its map of being a fairly small localized situation. I wanted it to feel bigger. Now, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the book itself, does hint at a bigger story. And that's the part that I've latched onto. That's the part that I was really inspired by. I like big stories. So when I was coming up with the idea of the layout of the Azure Sea, well, a sea by definition is usually encircled by land. Usually, not always, and there are a whole bunch of exceptions, obviously, but a sea is oftentimes encircled by land, or at least not part of a gigantic body of water without some serious navigation. Point number one. Point number two is that I wanted my players to be contained within an environment, within a space that I could control. I like to control where my characters go, so if I make a map that gives them a huge amount of terrain to explore, that gives them all of the story options their hearts could desire, but which happens within a space that I can control, that's brilliant. Hence making the idea of this sickle-shaped piece of land that forms the bulk of the continent, and then island chains, archipelagos and atolls and all of the like around the other edge, preventing the players from easily leaving the Azure Sea. Now, I also do not maintain that there should simply be a hard edge, sorry, you can't go further. If my players decide that they want to travel further beyond, they want to sail out into the oceans and go and explore the rest of the world, that is fine, and there is a chance that they're going to do that. However, I am going to make sure that they're not going to do that in the first couple adventures, which is where most of our effort is spent in terms of GM preparation. This cyclical shape keeps them contained within the sphere of the Azure Sea. So we've got down south, we've got Draswyn and the Fairwood Forest. The Fairwood Forest, of course, is controlled by the elves, and I've decided that elves in my game, traditionally anyway, are evil. They are the drow, if you so like, of the surface. They are evil and they control this dark Fairwood Forest, and so if the characters want to head south, they've got to get through the forest. There's a lot of forest, and that takes them to a place called Darkenwald. Darkenwald is not a happy place. Or we've got the Kambasha Mountains down here and Lake Toshial. Lake Toshial, again, is also an incredibly dangerous lake. So it's not great. Coville allows them to go south for sure across the open lands here. There's a little windmill that the artist put in there for me. I think it's a delightful little piece of detailing. But again, if they want to head south, I've got giant plains that allow me to spend at least a session with the players wandering south, and then I can draw the rest of the map further on down. If they want to try and sail across the ocean on this side, well, there's a certain psychological barrier that I put in when I put in all of these different flags of the different races that are in this area, but at the same time, they've got to get there. They're starting in Saltmarsh. So sure, cross the Ghana Mountains, get to Sajan, across the desert wastes of the Dajan Wastes, good luck to you. Alternatively, you can come up to Havenhill and the Sunken Bay. There's a reason why it's called the Sunken Bay. They will discover that if they try and sail across it. We've got the lizard folk territories, Qualt Ux, and all of the various names, the Sasahakwe Bay, for example, one of my favorites. Now, we've then got all of this other bits and pieces around here, which prevents them from leaving. They've got Malcolm's Passage and they've got the Straits of Jane. Good luck to them getting out. They're going to need to be very calm and serene when they do that. If they try, anyway. We've got False Hope Volcano. We've got the Three Sisters, which protect them. Palgain's Atoll, for example, is here. Con's Folly protects the borders. So there is a lot to keep them within. Now, you've got the Kingdom of the Merfolk. That's Meros City, which is this sunken city in the middle of the caldera of an ancient volcano, which is now an atoll, by the way. That's what an atoll is all about. We've got the Shakan Reef for the shark race people that we created for this whole thing. We've got the lizard folk. The lizard folk, of course, are strongly utilized in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I don't see why not. They're a great race to play. So we've got them. We've got Saltmarsh with the Dowered Forest and the Old Wood. We've got some dwarves here at Canbar. We've got the Sajan, which are new. And then, of course, we've got the elves down here. We've got Ansir. Ansir is not a huge city. It is there. We've got Coville down here and then Bleak Point Island. So we've got all of these different places that our characters can explore and they can go and look at. Again, designed on the idea that early level play will be around the Saltmarsh, Aesir perhaps, Koval, maybe the lizard folk territories. Ghosts of Saltmarsh has a lizard folk adventure, the second adventure, which requires a marsh. I have a marsh. They can go where they like. They can go where they choose. Then I wanted the ocean to be important as well, not just a standard blue ocean. I wanted there to be more detail. And in particular, I wanted there to be different areas of the ocean, because that is how the real ocean works. Now, all of this is simply prepping the game space. We're still going through that. And I think the reason why the ocean is so important is when you say Ghosts of Saltmarsh, although Sinister Secrets is based in a mansion that's haunted supposedly, and there's a smuggler element to it, and the smugglers have a little ship, the general atmosphere of Ghosts of Saltmarsh is that there's quite a strong nautical component. And when you unpack some of the later adventures, there's definitely underwater stuff going on there, as well as ship combat. So that means that your sea can't just be this big blue blank canvas. There must be more to it. And so that's exactly what I did. I wanted there to be certain areas, if you will, where the players could travel fairly freely and fairly easily. Hence Bannon's Channel. Now, Bannon's Channel is this long channel that starts here near Aesir, runs past Saltmarsh, runs around and takes you all the way down to Mons Sakari. So it's this big channel that's going to allow the players, what's its length? I think it's about 250 miles of ocean, if you like, which will take the standard ship maybe 3 days to sail. It's a nice big broad stretch of ocean where we can have ocean-like adventures. But again, I wanted to restrict their ability to just sail out and carry on over the windswift ocean. And yes, I chose that name specifically. I like to pay homage to my earlier games. Mons Sakari, I decided, was this large area where you get this doldrum effect. Now, a doldrum is a nautical term for an area where there is just no wind. When you enter the doldrums, it's sometimes an expression for being depressed. There's no wind, so sailing ships stop. And without wind, you can't move forward. Now, there are a whole bunch of things we're going to be talking about with the Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign. Brace yourselves, by the way, this is going to be a long video. But Mons Sakari is an area where there is no wind. So you sail in there knowing that you are going to have very poor winds. It slows you down before you get to choose between Malcolm's Passage, which takes you past volcanoes, or the Straits of Jin, which takes you out near Palgan's Atoll, which may or may not be heavily pirated. Again, just keeping the players in the space that I want them to play in. I'm not going to unpack the rest of the map because there's so much more that I can talk about. What I do want to point out is that, I beg your pardon, when I add all of these pins in World Anvil, all of this information is now added in here. So here, Mons Sakari, a broad patch of dangerously calm water, and the site of a battle which secured peace in the realm. Now, remember when we created our our Havast Gankari character, we had them die in a famous battle. That was part of their backstory. Well, this is where it happened. That's what I decided. This is where it happened. So it's a calm water. There are doldrums everywhere. It slows you down. You've got Jen's Passage. So all of these little tokens and things have been added in because of my use in World Anvil. And I can then open them up and say, okay, well, let's go and do a write-up about, say, Mons Sakari. There is the article that I will then write out in full just above my head, where it will then include all kinds of other bits and pieces. So once I had a map, I could then start to work forward and I could start to add things in. But as with any good campaign, you need to have a focus on your principal elements, your core elements. So we've got our plot. Yes, we need to have our first adventure, getting there, but we need to unpack our core elements of what our players expect. We've got a map. Great. What do we expect from that map? Well, we've got the Shah Khan, We've got the merfolk, we've got aquatic elves, we've got sea kobolds, we've got lizard folk, we've got humans, we've got elves, we've got dwarves. Who knows what else we've got? So we've got a lot of different races. And when we, again, going back to our plot outline, we've got the Lizard Alliance, Aquatic Adventures, the Sahaugen as well. That's another race that I forgot to mention. We've got this massive climatic battle where we've got all sorts of things going on. What else do we need? Well, quite frankly, what else do we need is we need to start establishing what races our players can play. They're going to want to play different races. They're going to want to play merfolk or kobolds, seabolds, as we've come to call them. Maybe they want to play the Shakan. Maybe they want to play lizard folk. Again, in Dungeons and Dragons, some of these races exist. The lizard folk, for example, exist. You can play a lizard folk character if you grab the lizard folk, if you grab the appropriate rulebook. There are races that there aren't stats for. The merfolk, for example, the seabolds, the Shakan, as we're calling them, the Shakan. Those have to be created. And for that, I then turn to Fantasy Grounds. Fantasy Grounds allows you to create all sorts of things, but principally it allows you to create these races. So I have added in here Aquatic Elf, Merfolk, Seabold, and Shakan. Now I know that there are Aquatic Elf options somewhere, one of the books has them, but I wanted to make Aquatic Elves special. So I've gone in here and I've created Aquatic Elves to have a few bits and pieces which I quite liked. I was talking to the players as we're starting to get there, as we're starting to unpack this entire campaign, this very nautical-based campaign, and one of the players was saying, well, sea elves seem to be almost like drow, but wet. And I quite liked that idea. I thought, you know, actually, if there was this split, and we've now established that the elves of Feywood are quite evil, they're quite demonic, or dark, I should say. They're twisted wild elves. Perhaps there was a great split, and you had the drow going underground, and you had another group who said, no, we forsake land. We're going to the water. And so that's where the aquatic elves came from. So I wanted the aquatic elves to be understood from that perspective. So I needed to create my own. We then looked at the merfolk. We said, okay, well, what do merfolk going to have here? I've done the full write-up where we've got sample names and things, as well as then I've statted them out, giving them various scores that are applicable within the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition system. So we've got merfolk. So if the players want to play a merfolk, they can just drag it and drop it and go from there. So there's lots of fun features that one can add in, again, using Fantasy Grounds or whatever VTT you choose to use. More importantly, or not more importantly, additionally, I should say, Ghosts of Saltmarsh has ship combat. And principally, each ship has various components that you can target. They have sails, they have helm, they have hull, and then each of the weapon systems that the ships happen to have are also components which have their own armor class and their own hit points. If the ship's hull reaches 0, the ship is sinking. If the ship's sails reach 0, the ship's speed is reduced significantly. If the ship's weapons are destroyed, they can't fire back. These things make sense. Now, again, one can keep track of all of the different templates and things without a doubt. Absolutely, they are all available, and one can make your own as you so choose. Keeping track of it, though, during a live stream is difficult, because you don't want to have bits of paper all over the place, but allowing the players and the GM to interface with the same thing has always been a challenge for me around the table. Do you both keep track of the hit points of the various structures, or does one of you keep track and then the other one keeps having to ask, how many hit points do your sails have left? How many that... Again, we take it into a VTT situation, and that allows us to add our ships to the combat tracker, which you'll see over here, where I can see that this is the RNS Thunder's Bite. It's got sails with its hit points, it's got its mangonels, it's got its ballista, it's got its helm. I can see all of those bits and pieces, and there is the Red Falcon, the enemy ship that will be attacking the poor old Thunder's Bite. It's got the same bits and pieces. Different ships, of course, have got different weapons and different hull and the like. That we're going to get to later on. So now I could quite literally have the Thunder's Bite attack the Red Falcon Ballista, for example, or the Red Falcon Mangonel, or the sails, or however I want to do it. Let me just zero that damage now while we're at it. So this took a little bit of time. This has all been preset, by the way, within the virtual tabletop, within Fantasy Grounds, if you buy the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book here. So it's all been preset, which is very useful. What hasn't been preset is the actual battle map. Now, you've seen this battle map before if you watched the channel. This is the one that I have custom made, and I have to admit, I have also written some custom rules. Well, not custom rules, they're supplemental to what are presented within the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book. And it's principally to deal with distance. So I tested out with Michael Kesevan from Dead Aussie Gamer YouTube channel. I tested out the ship combat with him. And there were 9 rounds where the ships could fire at each other with disadvantage using their mangonels. That was pretty much it. The reason being, mangonels have a range of 800 feet. That's huge. 800 feet. This map here is not big enough. 10 squares at 800 feet would be 80 squares. That's simply, it's unfathomable. I mean, it's so big, the word, it doesn't even come close. So what do? Well, what I've done is, again, I've written a supplemental rule system, which will be coming out probably in the next couple of weeks or so, where I have abstracted certain things. Ship movement, ship speed, all those kinds of things are factors. And yes, you can play them out 100 foot by 100 foot by 100 foot if you so choose. Or the system that I developed, and this is specifically for this game, by the way, is where we use this little slider down here, which I made, where we just keep track of the ship is at 800 foot, 400 foot, 300 foot, 200 foot, 100 feet, 50 feet, and then they are engaged with one another at boarding distance. So the 2 ships that I have here are actually just to represent relative ship position, not distance. So where is this ship? Where is the Thunder's Bite versus the Red Falcon? And that is all that we are concerned with. Now, that is our distance tool. So I had to do this. This is part, and the reason why I'm including in the video is because it's part of what you need to do as a game master to unpack the experience that your players are going to have and that you are going to have. So when I read the ship combat within Ghosts of Saltmarsh, it's perfectly adequate and it is perfectly serviceable, and it inspired me to then go, well, if this is a good system, how can I make it faster and better? It doesn't, well, maybe I can make it faster. It doesn't necessarily make it better. Most spells don't have a range of 800 foot. As a matter of fact, individual characters, from what I could find in all of the research that I have done, 600 feet is the furthest that an individual player character is likely to be able to target something. And that's with a longbow firing with disadvantage. Now, as far as I know from spells, 300 foot is as far as they're going to get with extended spell and. Whatever system you're using, look at those kinds of things and say, okay, so if it is this far, what is the visual distance at ocean level that you can see? 5,500 feet on a fairly standard day. So the 2 ships are going to see each other when they're a mile apart. Combat's only going to start when, if you don't have any long-range weaponry, you're only at 300 feet. Do you have to keep track of all of that? That was what was going through my mind. So that's when I came up with this scaling system, is that you get a round of attack at 800 feet, which is the range of mangonels, which is the principal weapon in Ghosts of Saltmarsh for ships. Then you move forward a whole jump of 400 feet. The ships don't move 400 foot in one round. That's not how they work. That doesn't matter. It allows them both to move forward. They both have a reduction in the amount of damage that they're dealing with to each other, But at 400 foot, it's still mangonels. 300 foot, however, it's mangonels and now ballista and longbows. If you've got a ranger on board, or if you've got someone who's very good with a longbow, they can start attacking the crew. At 200 feet, well, now we start to look at more personal spells. At 100 feet, definitely we've got range for magic missile, for sleep, for all kinds of shenanigans. At 50 feet, mangonels can no longer fire at each other because it's too close range, but we've now got a lot more spells that now can take effect. And at 0, we've got boarding. And this is going to slide up and down as the ship captains make their decisions. I've also got the wind tracker here in terms of my compass. This is not what is north facing, this is which way is the wind blowing. The compass points, I suppose I could have actually removed them and just put a big arrow. That's because, again, the ships have a speed when they are with the wind, as they are here, or if the wind is blowing north and they are sailing in the opposite direction, they're against the wind. So they have a different movement speed there, which will affect this tracker anyway. It's all in the supplemental book. The combat system, however, is also something that we can utilize a virtual tabletop for to enhance. So I built this map layout, this template in Photoshop, and then I brought it in here. I have got the helm, the sails, the mangonels, and the ballista of the Thunder's Bite preloaded, and I've got the Red Falcons ones as well, and I've got room for additional. Some ships have got 2 mangonels or 2 ballista or even more, and I suppose I could tack them on. This way I can drag my attack of the ballista firing from the Thunder's Bite, firing at the Red Falcon. I could either choose to attack the Red Falcon specifically or one of its component parts. So I can roll against that, roll a 19, that's definitely a hit, and now I can roll my damage against the sails of the Red Falcon, and it automatically applies the damage to that, a miserable 5 points of damage. I rolled a 1, a 3, and a 1 off of 3d10. 5 damage to the sails. If the sails reach 0, the ship speed is reduced significantly, and the ship may eventually get too far away to follow. So all of this I have put into Fantasy Grounds so that when I'm running ship combat, it's slick and it's easy and it's simple to do. The rule system that I've written out, again, I've written it out so that I can give it to my players so they can understand ship combat and how it will work during the game session. So those are some of the things that have been part of my preparation this week on how to move the adventure forward. It doesn't stop there. I've also been building maps, as many maps as I possibly can, in Dungeon Fog. Ship maps, to be specific. I want to be able to see the layout of those ships behind, well, not behind me, but I want my players to be able to know that they can go in at this level. This is the deck level. They can run inside here. They can go down the stairs. They can go to the cabins and things. I need to have all of that so I can load that into Fantasy Grounds as well so that my players can interact. Once we get to the boarding stage of the game, once they get to boarding, quite literally the board gets put across, we're going to have combat, and then we're going to bring in all of the tokens and things that we need. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of prep for this week in terms of assembling the bits and bobs that I need to be able to run this game properly. And it doesn't stop there, as a matter of fact. There's been a lot of work done this week. In World Anvil, let me just go back to World Anvil very, very quickly. In World Anvil, I have now also started to create some articles. I've started to write up certain characters, if you will. And this is just to give you an idea of the number of articles that exist at the moment. These are all the articles there. You can see they've all got pathetic little word counts, very small word counts, except for Commodore Havost Gankari. So let's go and have a look at Havost Gankari. The rest I still have to carry on writing. So here we've got some layout. I've got to figure out this CSS pattern. I'm not entirely happy with it, but we've got his sound, his smell, his touch, his emotional state, what he does when he's happy. And then we've got his full write-up down here. So the Black Tide was a curse. He was treated badly by his king. And then whilst I was working it out, the template of World Anvil prompted me to give him a morality and a philosophy. And part of my thinking was, well, what does he want? What does he want? And part of it would be vengeance. So I worked out that he wants 14,400 lives. That's how many he believes have been affected because he did not win the Battle of Mons Sakari. So once he has killed 14,400 individuals, he will be at rest because he will have done what he needed to do. And the king has to apologize. If the king doesn't apologize, he's going to just continue on his rampage and destroy the kingdom because he believes the kingdom is corrupt. So by writing him out, I've got some of the statistics down here. I've got the languages that he can read and write and speak, etc., etc. I've got all of that. I need to create him as a character in Fantasy Grounds, which I still have to do. But at least now I know that his middle name is Willem. So it's Havost Willem Gankari, aka the Commodore. So yes, all of that is now laid out. I can link that to whatever it is that I want to link it to. In terms of the ship that he's going to be controlling and the like. I still need to create, and this is just the fun of creation as far as I'm concerned. This is really the part that I enjoy the most. Not enjoy the most, I just enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. Is I still need to create adventure number 1, which is our opening battle sequence. That is going to be something to watch, and that I will be doing next week as the videos. I think this one comes out this week. Next week is the next one. I lose track. Anyway, I will be creating that adventure. Hopefully it will be in time for you to be able to see it. Otherwise you'll have to watch the adventure and then come back to the videos and go, ah, that's what he was doing. That's what he was planning on doing. Anyway. That is going to include a whole bunch of things. As I've been writing the supplemental rules, I realized, well, hang on a moment, I can add in more ships. And I've added in a whole lot of different ships, almost 30 of them to be exact, in terms of what I have created. And yes, the supplement will be made available for you to purchase from our website, anon with illustrations and the like. But these things take time to put together. For now, I just need to do it so that my players have a standard reference point that we can all look at and say, ah, a dwarvish warship has trebuchets? What madness is this? Anyway, so until next week, I wish you and yours the very happiest of ghost marsh, salt plodding, underwater adventures, naval adventures of the aquatic kind. And until next time, happy gaming.